and say a week for the 8 minutes. Okay, yes, man. Man in the wilderness. I am here. I am here. With the diaspora full panel, you know. Yes, man. We are here.
Mike.
Here. Yes. Alongside,
Mike.
you know, we have Rattigan right here, you know. Yeah, man. You know, the renegade is here. You know, you see the man over there, so Rattigan. You know him not playing on the talent. Herb right here, you know. Specialist. I'm waiting on the health minister to sign on. Them say I sign on now, right? Them I try to deal with that right now, yeah. And then we have Jeffery Tavares. You know the place full of specialists. And this name Diaspora Hard Talk. Yeah, yeah, man, the Hard Talk. Yeah, man, well Hard Talk, you know. Yeah, so with us keep it real. You know, we're waiting on the health minister to come on now. So yeah, you know, we'll have some nice discussion. Right now. Not true, Ratty?
Indeed.
Yes, man.
Yes, sir.
All right. It's Jeffrey's here and Herb is here. So, you know, we're just waiting on the health minister to log on. And we're ready to go. Yeah?
Yes, sir, because we're going to speak about some various issues that is facing our country.
Okay, you know. Yes, man. This is the Diaspora Hard Talk. Yeah, man.
That's a very good name.
We don't hold back nothing, you know. Yes, you know. Yeah, man, we'll keep it real. Yeah? Yeah, man. All right, maybe just we could see how yeah. We could just send a quick text and see what's up. Send a quick text and see what's up, you know.
Mr. Lonesome, you have been having some very nice topics and people coming on and so forth.
Yes, man. So we keep it real. We want to move the country in the right direction and keep it real at all times, you know. Okay. Dr. Christopher Tufton is here. Hey, good evening, Dr. Tufton. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Dr. Tufton, you can hear me? Can you hear us? He's here, but
I think he's having internet issues.
Yeah, he like freeze up. Yes. Like him freeze up, right? Yeah.
I'm here.
You can hear me?
I hear you now.
You're hearing me about your thing freezing up, little though. We don't know that the internet freezing up. Maybe the connection. Connection if you freeze up, right? Yeah, man. Yes,
hello?
but you can hear me now?
Hello.
Yes. You can hear us now?
I hear you now. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, but good. Okay, yeah, but good. Yeah, man, good evening. And this is the panel. You're facing the panel in our talk, you know. Will Rattigan here, Herb Nelson, yes, and right. Jeffery Tavares and I, the man in the wilderness. How you doing?
I'm fine, man. Hanging in there.
Okay, good. All right, we have a lot of questions, you know, to chew at you, because, nice, you can be here, right? So make we start off like this, right? In the hospital across Jamaica, we see a lot of problem in the hospital. But we really need you to address some of these issues, like the CT scan. We have hospital short staff. That's the next thing. CT scan machine not working. Dialysis machine. Well, the other day we see you do around 10. You bought around 10 new machines. That's good. But we know we want even maybe a couple hundred to fulfill the problem in Jamaica. What are you going to do about that in this fiscal year?
All right. So I think we have to understand the genesis of the challenges we face in public health firstly, we have to admit and accept that health has been under-resourced for many, many years. In fact, as population increase, the infrastructure that is required has not kept up pace with the population. So the last hospital we built in Jamaica was nearly 25 years ago. That was the Maypen Hospital. The rest, some of them are predates independence. Added to that is the fact that not only is the population increasing or has increased, but the sick profile of the population, lifestyle diseases, hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, we call them non-communicable diseases, which kills 75% of all the Jamaicans who die each year, 17,000 or so. And that creates significant strain on infrastructure. What we have done, in answering your question, since I've been Minister of Health 7 years or so ago, apart from tackling COVID, which was a great disruptor for everybody, we have embarked on the largest infrastructure build-out that we have seen as a country since independence. We're building out Spanish Town Hospital. We're going to be breaking ground hopefully over the next month or so. It's about $60 million US. We are, of course, renovating Cornwall, which is like a brand new hospital altogether because it collapsed. We're building out Western Children and Adolescent in Mobe beside Cornwall. That's a gift of the Chinese, but it's also involves some expenditure from us. Maypen, St. Ansby, and I could go on. So the big infrastructure build out, nearly 250 million US of it, will take a few more years to complete. That will add a lot more beds. But then beyond that, we have had to also build out the equipment, many of which are outdated. So you talk about things like CT scans and so on. What we have done to ease the burden is to do a public-private partnership. So we spend about $1 billion a year now over the past 3 years. So when you go to a hospital and you can't get a CT scan, you can go to a private entity that we negotiate a price with. And that has eased the burden to a large extent while we try to right-size the infrastructure that we're building out with equipment. Beyond that now, you talk about personnel, nurses. Well, the simple problem is that the world have a shortage of healthcare workers, and Jamaica produce very good nurses. We have an internationally reputable cadre of nurses. We cannot train them fast enough for them to have the option of migrating. We lose them as soon as we train them, particularly specialist nurses. The reality is we can't compete with America, with the UK, Canada to some extent in terms of the salary packages, no matter how we try. And as a consequence, we're trying now to see how we can collaborate rather than compete through some joint training and some exchange programs so that we can benefit from them, even though they may be working in North America and the other developed markets. It's a very complicated challenge, but the truth is, it is a reality that we have built up over time, and we're trying now to right-size it and manage it. And COVID didn't help the situation, to be totally frank, because COVID was a great disruptor for everybody.
So my make I give you a little advice though. Why the health ministry don't come up with a program like give the nurses a package. You pay for the nurses the teaching of the nurses, right? And make them give you 5 years, commitment of 5 years before them can leave on or something like that. It's gonna be a better thing for them because most of them finding their fee, their money, paying that, and then when them not get the pay when them come and work in the public hospital and it's not enticing, them gonna leave. So why you don't do something like that?
Well, listen, a lot of the nurses that are trained are bonded after they're trained because the government may subsidize or pay for their education. The reality is when the recruitment agencies come to Jamaica, they offer to pay off the bond. So you can't bond enough because the demand is so great in places like North America. The agencies that recruit will pay that off immediately. They not only do that, they arrange work permits. They waive in recent times the entry exams because the Jamaican nurses have a very good reputation. So we're kind of fighting on a field that is uneven because those markets have very big demand and they have very deep pockets. So you can't bond them enough. And the truth is, the mobility of labor is a standard feature of every society now. And you can literally imprison people not to move. If they want to move and they have the opportunity to move, they're going to move. So the solution is lying now in how we come together to find a space that can collaborate around training and expand the cadre of training. Now, let me say one other thing. You may ask why we don't train more, because that's always a very common question. Two things that restrict us from training more nurses, specialist nurses in particular. One is faculty. There's a ratio of teacher to nursing student. And if you go over that ratio, it compromises the certification process. So we don't have enough trained faculty. And that's also a big problem all over the world. So that restricts the numbers we can train at a time. The second is what they call clinical rotation. So when you train a specialist nurse in the classroom, they have to then go practice in a hospital. So if you want to train an ICU nurse, they have to train around an ICU bed so that they get the practical experience. If we only have 100 ICU beds and we can only train 2 nurses at a time around a bed, then that means we can only train 200 nurses. We would love to train 500, but if you don't have the clinical rotation space, it limits you. So what I've been doing is to explore if the nurses can be trained here and in America or in the UK. Before COVID, we sent about 25 nurses with their faculty to Leeds Teaching Hospital, where I had negotiated an agreement with the UK government to do clinical rotation at Leeds. It was a very successful program. The nurses lived there for, I think, 4 months or so, 4 or 5 months. They worked as RNs and they trained as specialists. They came back, they enjoyed it, they qualified. After COVID, the UK suspended the pilot while they thought it was a good idea, and they have started to just recruit directly. I was told last year by the UK authorities that they recruited 140 specialist nurses from Jamaica last year. So what people are doing now, recognizing the need that they have, is just straight recruitment. And it is a real difficult challenge, but we're trying to see how we can get collaboration. One final thing, the US government recently announced, because they have a shortage too, that they would want to train 500,000 healthcare workers as a collaborative effort to satisfy the UK market. And so they're working now on finding a way to collaborate. So we're involved in that conversation. I am hoping it will lead to the kind of collaboration that I've just spoken of. So hopefully there's some possibilities on the horizon for collaboration.
All right, I have some other question to ask, but I'm going to pass you on to Rattigan. You ready?
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Minister, good evening, sir.
Good evening to you, sir.
Yeah, actually, I'm in a travel status. I'm inappropriately dressed for a man of your stature, but
no, man, it's fine. No worry about
it. But when the man in the wilderness calls, I have to respond. And wild horses could not have kept me away from tonight's discussion.
Yes.
Well, let me start with you. Let's stick with the topic of nurses. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You made a trip to the United States. Specifically, you went to Florida, you went to Georgia, and I think you went to Connecticut. Did you go in Washington? Okay.
And New York.
New York, right. And it was reported in the press that the purpose of your trip was to recruit Jamaican nurses who had left Jamaica and were now working in the United States. First question, is that true?
Not exactly. Not exactly. What I went on the trip to do, I went to 8 health systems. The US, as you know, has a fragmented healthcare system. So they are governed by their state. There are some federal rules, but there are state rules, as opposed to the UK that has a national system. So what I did, I went to different states, visited different health systems to discuss with the management of these health systems the possibility of collaboration, starting with getting some of our operating theater specialist nurses to come back on a short-term basis to help us to clear up the backlog of surgeries. We have about 6,000 people waiting on elective surgeries, hernia, fibroids, that sort of thing. And we're short of the nurses in the operating theater rooms. Secondly, to explore if we can develop a joint training course that will see the nurse being trained in Jamaica and in the particular state. And then after we are finished training that nurse, we give the nurse a flexible contract so that they can work both in the US and in Jamaica. Because my view is that if you don't give people a choice, they will exercise the choice that is most beneficial financially to them. But most Jamaican nurses would prefer to live in Jamaica, but they just want to earn more. So that was a kind of exploratory trip, not exactly just to recruit back home.
All right, a couple follow-up questions. One is, how many Jamaican nurses were you able to recruit to come back to Jamaica?
So on the short-term recruitment, I think it's important to define what recruitment means. We have so far had 3 missions of operating theater nurses that have come home for 3 to 4 days. We schedule the surgeries with them. So we had a mission of 6, for example. I can't give you the details of all this, but we had a mission of 6 that went into Montego Bay, went to Noel Holmes Hospital in Hanover, and they did 20 surgeries over 2 days. With our surgeons, they supported the surgeons and they used the operating theater at Noel Holmes. And that was highly successful. We have since had a few others that have come into Kingston, Bustamante Hospital, UWI, to do the same thing. So and we have some others planned that are going to take place.
Okay.
But they come and go back. They don't come and stay.
Okay. Now here is the killer question for you, right? I'm taking you out in deep waters now. All right, prepare yourself. Now you just mentioned that you've been the Minister of Health for approximately 7 years.
Yes.
And you should have been aware of the migration of nurses. As you said before, it's something that just didn't start recently. It's something that started a long time ago. True. Why did you wait until now to go and discuss collaboration and flexibility, joint training courses? Why did you wait now when that problem existed way back when?
Right. No, that's a reasonable question. For starters, I didn't. The pilot that I explained that I did with the UK, we did about 3 years ago, 3+ years ago. It took us a year or maybe more to negotiate with that agreement. And incidentally, we also did a pilot
Minister,
with China.
Can you tell the country and the people in the diaspora?
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Go to. Yes.
I was saying that we didn't wait. In fact, when I became minister after the first year, I went to the World Health Organization head office in Switzerland and appealed through a resolution to the world that nursing shortage was a crisis, particularly for developing countries, and we needed to do something about it. So it's not a process of waiting. And we did a pilot too with China. We sent Jamaican nurses to China for clinical rotation. And that was also fairly successful, except some of the language barrier issues. So it's been a chronic problem, but it's a problem that the world is facing. The data is that the world needs, I think, a couple million healthcare workers over the next 20 years. So they're not training them fast enough. We're trying, but it's difficult with the lack of faculty and clinical space.
All right, I won't browbeat you on that one, but I have one more thing, and I see that the rest of the panel, they're waiting eagerly to ask your question. So let me just end with this first round with just this one question. In October 2018, you were quoted as saying that only 20% of the Jamaican population had health insurance, of which 11% were government workers and 9% came from the private sector. And at that time, you promised to introduce a national health insurance scheme. Have you implemented that scheme in place? And if not, when do you plan to implement that national health insurance scheme?
Right. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Yes.
Okay. So healthcare financing is a real issue, and more so because of rising cost. And you're right, most of the population do not have formal insurance. But what most of the population has is access to free healthcare in the public sector. What most of the population has is access to free drugs through the National Health Fund. But the costs are rising, and the quality of the access is challenging because of what I've said earlier. So part of the insurance that I'm talking about is how do we improve the quality of the access? So when people go to hospital, how do we improve that they get the care that they deserve and need? And how do we expand the National Health Fund, which is a kind of insurance, but we want to add more services to it. So what we have done through the outsourcing of diagnostic is a kind of insurance, because what it means is that people who couldn't get the CT scan unless they pay for it can now get it free, but they get it in the private sector based on a negotiated position. But to formalize that is going to take time and reform. And there are a lot of questions now about how it is paid for. That is the real challenge. How do you pay for that insurance?
But Mr. Minister, with all due respect, you said this in 2018, and here it is that we're in 2023, and now you're still saying that, well, we don't. Well, first of all, if I hear you correctly, you're saying we don't have it. We have a kind of sort of thing, and so it's going to take more time to build this out. And the question I ask you is, since you didn't have it, when do you, as minister, suggest, propose, indicate to us that we will have this scheme? Because poor people are waiting for this. Since you mentioned it in 2018 and they haven't seen it. So when can you give us at least an approximate date or time when this will come into effect?
Well, first of all, Jamaicans are far better off today than they were 7 years ago in terms of access to healthcare. And I'll challenge anybody on that, although I do so cautiously, because I agree that it is not perfect. But in the insurance as a terminology doesn't have to fit the kind of typical insurance as we have defined insurance, where you pay into a scheme and then get a particular benefit. The insurance for the general public is that they pay their taxes and we offer free healthcare at the point of entry. The quality has improved in terms of, as I said, diagnostic is one, very much so. The National Health Fund, for example, a year ago, 3 years ago, we're issuing just over 1.5 million prescription drugs. Since we expanded the access to drugs with the public-private drug serve windows, we're now issuing closer to 3 million prescriptions a year, meaning that people who want a solution on the prescription pad, they can now get it when previously they couldn't. And bear in mind, back in 2008, prior to Golden becoming prime minister, the government of the day made a commitment that we would eliminate the user fee in hospitals, where people were staying out because they couldn't afford the $500 or the $1,000. That has created a much bigger demand on the system, and maybe rightfully so, because people were staying out because they just couldn't afford it. And we have had to increase every year up to this point, the accessibility. So if you're asking me, are people getting greater access? I am prepared to say absolutely yes. But that is more complicated because people are getting sicker from lifestyle diseases. And the quality of that access sometimes needs to be improved because we have not invested in healthcare over a long period of time. Sorry about the complicated response, but that's just the reality.
You still haven't given us the answer yet, though, as to when you think this will take place. But I'll yield to my fellow panelists.
All right, Jeffrey.
Good night, Dr. Tufton. How are you doing?
Not too bad, sir.
I know you don't remember me, but that's okay.
How you know
that? Let us go back to the health fund.
Yes.
You said that the government has the National Health Fund that help people with medication.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that done by Comprehensive Clinton Crossroad Minister? They don't have any medication down there.
Well, that's a very extreme statement, though. I mean, they issue medication to thousands of people a day. You can, if you challenge me on one particular medication, we have the National Health Fund has a VEN list of over 1,000 drugs, meaning if it's, say, hypertension is covered, we have 17 categories of illness that is covered by the National Health Fund. So cardiovascular disease is the biggest killer in Jamaica. So people get stroke and so on, heart attacks, whatever. There is a line of drugs that deal with cardiovascular disease. You may have 50 different drugs because not everybody react the same way. And when you combine all of those drugs, you have about 1,000. Now, I cannot tell you that you don't run out sometimes, and that maybe one pharmacy may not have it. And so you have to kind of, the logistics and the management of it. But we spend about $10 billion a year on drugs. So it would be extreme to say we don't have any drugs. We could argue about a particular drug, and over 1 million Jamaicans benefit each year from those drugs and continue to benefit. So I think that's a good achievement. And the Health Fund has done its best, I must admit, in trying to satisfy that demand.
Okay, Minister, can you tell the diaspora and the people of Jamaica how much money has been spent on the Cornwall General Hospital so far?
So far, I think about I don't have the numbers in front of me, but maybe about 3 billion or somewhere in that region. 3 billion Jamaican dollars, of course.
And
so
could you say?
Go
ahead.
Yeah, so far about 3 billion Jamaican, 150 to 1, so that would be what, 10, 15 million US, somewhere in that region, yeah.
Could you say when it's going to be finished?
Right, so we are hoping that we will move to the final stage in another month or two. And then from there, we'll have a phased reopening of Cornwall. So hopefully by the end of this calendar year, we will start occupying the main building, because that's the subject of the renovation, going into next year, all the way through the end of next year, with occupying different parts until we fully complete. So if you ask me about occupation, I say maybe hopefully the end of the year we'll start. The completion maybe carrying you back into the end of the following year. Now, I want to say something on Cornwall, if I may, Chairman, and the rest of colleagues and listeners online, because Cornwall is an Achilles heel for me personally, something I totally regret. I've learned a lot from the experience. The reality is that Cornwall was a disaster waiting to happen. A 50-year-old hospital building that was poorly maintained and one day just collapsed. We initially thought it was an air quality issue and ordered the ventilation system to be replaced. But when we dug down, we realized that the building was compromised, the piping were leaking, the roof was leaking, the electrical equipment. The long and short of it is that we had to strip the building down to the concrete and mortar and reinforce that building. So what started out as one problem became 10 problems. And I had to stop the work. I stopped the work for almost a year, and I attracted a lot of criticism for it because the people were not approaching it. This is the whole project team did not, in my view, have enough experience. Remember I told you we haven't built a hospital in Jamaica in 25 years. There's no contractor in Jamaica that understands hospital construction. And even in the terms of the designs and the technical people, this is a specialist building, it's not an apartment complex. Fast forward to today, we had to bring a company in from North America, some Jamaicans involved, which is good because they know the culture, who are experts in hospital construction. And they have done a thorough assessment of the brownfield site. And now we think we have a roadmap that is very much a much clearer roadmap in terms of what needs to be done. But essentially, it's a new hospital. And so I understand why people would be cynical because it was a moving target for a long time. I think we are where we are now, and we have learned a lot of lessons, and it won't happen in any other case. And ultimately, we'll have a brand new Cornwall Regional over the next year, 2 years.
Yes. Alex, I have two more questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Minister, why you don't allow the results of the dead baby scandal to come out?
The results were published, but you're asking me why why we didn't release the full report.
Yes, the full report, rather,
Yeah,
yes.
because we released the conclusions of the report and the recommendations. PAHO has a particular process that they go through to publish reports that they do. Because normally these reports, these technical reports are used to guide the government that has asked for the support, and sometimes very highly technical, and they have a committee, a kind of process, which takes some time. We took the position that we had done our own assessment and we had released that information. We got the PAHO report and we wanted to provide the conclusion and to deal with whatever challenge there were. And we felt that the most important aspect of the information was what were the conclusions and what were the recommendations. It wasn't for any sinister reason. We didn't want to wait until the PAHO process was fully completed in terms of releasing the information and the process that they had to go through. It's an internal decision. We didn't want any misinterpretation too, because it's highly technical. And the truth is, we fixed the problem once the problem was discovered. And we're working now to try and address some of the more longer term issues, some of which are difficult because it really comes down to personnel or the lack of personnel and the ratios between nurses and babies.
One final question for you now.
Yes.
Minister, out of that $1 trillion budget that was said by the Minister of Finance, is the Kingston Public Hospital going to get out of that $1 trillion to refurbish it? Because it is right now in a terrible condition, Minister.
That's where you were born.
No, I was born in Westmoreland.
Oh, you're a sub man. Okay. Fine.
Yes, I'm Negril man. I tell you, don't remember me.
All right. Yes, we have announced already that we're convening a special technical committee, which we'll speak more of later on, to review the Kingston Public Hospital, because I fear that what happened to Cornwall will happen to Kingston Public if we don't do a major overhaul. It will come to a grinding halt. It's a much older hospital, as you know, 240 years. And it serves a very critical constituency, the entire downtown, the entire belt, all the way to Spanish Town, Clarendon, all the way across the country. It's the most experienced trauma center in Jamaica. So what we're going to do this year, we're going to spend a few $100 million to hire the expertise to look at every crevice and corner of Kingston Public, look at the electrical, look at the plumbing, look at the building structure, look at the parking, look at all the areas, develop a technical report on what needs to be done, and then budget in subsequent years to begin a process of renovation. So you're absolutely right. It will get some attention because it does deserve and need that attention.
So Wayne, give me one more question to ask the minister.
Yes.
Minister, people are taking things out of the hospitals, and I hear you blame the members of staff and the public and everything. I never hear you said, you know what, the buck stop with me. Let us try and do something more about it. Because the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to blame you per se, because it is in a public area and people take tissues and whatever. But how is it that most of the things that happen within the health sector, I never hear you, my good friend, come out and say, you know what, the buck stop with me, Christopher Tufton. You always say somebody else.
Mr. Tavares or Jeffery, if you don't mind my calling you Jeffery.
Go ahead, man. You call me Jeffery. I was the boy coming up.
The book always stops with me. That's the reality.
Yes.
And every 5 years or 4 years, the Jamaican people have an opportunity to judge me harshly or kindly, as the case may be. That's the nature of the democracy. But think about it. I am the minister with responsibility for policy. There are 23,000 people who work in public health, from doctors, nurses to administrators. There are 325 health centers and 23 hospitals. We treat nearly 3 million cases a year, not people, but cases. 1.6 million in health centers, people who go through the health center, not cases, and 1.4 million in hospitals. I understand my role. My role is to guide that process and to ensure policies are there to promote health in the country. But don't tell me that I must sit down and watch over a bathroom facility in Sablamar if people not keeping it clean. What I have to do is hold the management of the health center. And I'm just using Sab as a case or Negril as a case. I'm not saying that they are the worst.
Well, I wish I could build a hospital in Negril because Negril don't have any.
Well, Negril have a private one that just opened the other day, and we are enhancing SAV, and we did some public-private enhancement of the Negril one recently. But the point I'm making, just picture this. There are some things that management has to be accountable for. No, I'm not saying that that doesn't reflect good or bad on me if something doesn't take place. And so if I have to intervene, I'll intervene. But I'm not going to not say to a manager of a health center or a hospital, you have the first responsibility to keep the bathroom clean, because I can't watch over the thousands of bathrooms that are in every institution across Jamaica. But ultimately, the people have a role to play, and they play it every 4 or 5 years, and that's just how it works.
So so Jeffrey, I'm gonna pass it on to Herb. Dr. Tufton, what Jeffrey was saying still, as the head, you're the minister, right? So you know your others have to go out and them have to do what them have to do. So if everything good, it stop with you. So anything bad, stop with you also, right? Herb.
Good afternoon, Dr. Tufton. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, sir.
Now, I can tell you, being a retired military person, 24 years, the refrain I heard for decades with each commander was, everything that you're successful at or anything that comes up as a failure, it rests with you. In other words, we have to train our people. We have to make demands on them. We have to set standards for them so that they can meet those standards. So I understand where you're coming from and I understand the things that you're trying to achieve. Let's talk about a key area that the Heal Our Land group 5 years ago discovered when they came down to Jamaica. It was, and I've seen an article from the KPH hospital about it. PTSD. Is PTSD a hidden mental disease in Jamaica where the police who may be suffering some form of instability goes on screen, and not just the police, but the military and the doctors as well said that they suffered PTSD. Is this an area of concern? And how do you go about uncovering this problem in the healthcare system?
Well, first of all, and I apologize if I sound long-winded, but mental health is a major problem in our country and indeed in the world. When I became minister in 2016, I commissioned a mental health and homelessness task force report with a conclusion that said that up to 40%, 4 of every 10 Jamaicans at some point in their lives have some sort of mental breakdown. Now, more specifically to your issue, and by the way, these people are not typical, what we identify as mental health, which is the man on the road sleeping under the piazza. It ranges from the boardroom to the shop floor. And we need to destigmatize this idea. And Mr. Lonesome, you need to run a program on mental health, because I tell you, you'll be surprised to know where it affects everybody. And at some point, everybody has to deal with it. But for the other issue specifically to you, Herb, is that post-traumatic stress disorder is a feature of a high trauma society. So it's not only at war, and sometimes people will argue that Jamaica is at war with itself. The crime rate is suggestive of that. And if you look at domestic violence, gang-related violence, we're a society that is full of trauma. It fills up our hospitals, road accidents, etc. So it's not unusual to see cases of this kind of mental health breakdown. Each institution, like the police and the army, they would have their internal mechanism. So for example, I'm telling tales out of school, cannot call any name. A person reached out to me recently to say his brother, who is a police officer, was in deep depression and was expressing kind of suicidal thoughts. I reached out to the authorities in the police force, combined with the health authorities, and a reach out was made. So there is a sort of combined approach that takes place. So institutions that are high stress, like the police force, have it. Health has it. During COVID, we had many health workers who were so burnt out and depressed that they just couldn't function. They literally broke down. And we have that kind of counseling. But beyond that, as a national response, this year we started to provide training for psychosocial support within our schools, working with teachers, guidance counselors, that sort of thing. And we're about to launch a program which will train community leaders. So the pastor in the community-based group leaders, so that we can provide an expanded response at the level of the community to do things like resolve disputes, to identify people who are withdrawn and are demonstrating signs of instability. And then we elevate that to the highest level for a psychiatrist or otherwise. So we do recognize it to be a big problem. It has become a bigger problem after COVID. It's a global problem. And we're trying to see how we can address it. But you're right, it is something that we have to tailoring and focus on.
Okay. One other area I'd like to focus on, and I've heard a lot of stories that there are shortages at some hospitals. Simple things like bed sheets, bed linen, pillows, even drugs. And then I get a note that tells me some employees are stealing. And the area they name was in the Northeast Regional Office, one of the hospitals, I think, up in St. Mary. And they stated the regional director is holding her position, but intimidating staff to go to court, even though the staff is not accountable. So they want to know what measures are being taken in the health sector to mitigate the fraudulent activity, given what is happening in the financial sector. In other words, I think the health or education has the biggest chunk of the budget. Am I right?
Yes, we're like number 3 in the allocation. This year we were 5 years ago. We're about number 3 now.
So it's getting up there.
Yeah, and the demand is justified. There's a lot of challenges in health. But let me just say a couple of things. Firstly, the vast majority of healthcare workers are honest, law-abiding people who work hard and don't involve themselves in that kind of deviant behavior. But like everywhere else and everything else, you do have deviants in the system who exploit the opportunities. And yes, we do have leakage of supplies and so on. There is a process. There's an internal mechanism at the level of the institution. If someone is determined to be a deviant and they're tried, they're entitled, their right to defend themselves, whether through a lawyer or otherwise. And that can ratchet up all the way to the regional health authority, and people can be arrested and charged. As I said, I think the vast majority are law-abiding. But we have had cases during my tenure where people have been arrested and charged, and the law can take its course if people are determined to steal. But it's an ongoing challenge because the system is not necessarily perfect. There's a process of inventory management, storage. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. But again, I don't think it's unique to Jamaica. It's a global issue. but we are working to try and improve it. One way we're trying to improve it, I should add, is through digitization of our health records and our inventory. The NHF, I think, has done a good job over the years in having a good inventory system where they have the digitized records of things that go out, where it goes, when it is used, that sort of thing. We are now embarking on a very significant digitization of our health records. We have signed a contract already to network hospitals and health centers through internet, the hardware that supports that. And next week, I'm signing with a UK-based firm to put the technology platform on top of that so that we can start that digitization process. And I think that will help a lot going forward.
So pretty much you're following some of the best practices that's out there, because I know recently the US has brought digitization to bear.
Yes.
A MyChart system where one hospital can look at a patient's record from 3,000 miles across the country.
And it has to, yeah, if you're going to modernize your system, you have to use the technology. So the idea, the end result of what we're doing is that in short order, meaning over the next year or so, we will begin to pilot a patient that may be in Negril at the Negril Health Center. Their sickness profile is uploaded on a cloud-based system, protected, of course, because confidentiality is key. If that patient has to be sent to Cornwall Regional in Montego Bay, the doctor don't have to review a paper-based file anymore. There's a unique identification number, appropriate access codes. The doctor can go in and say, John Brown, number so-and-so, and they can see the history of the patient. So what that does, it shortens time, time to treat the patient. It knows what they're allergic to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very important game-changing development for us that is being done in other countries in the world. You're right. In the UK, I visited Birmingham Hospital, where they are one of the most digitized hospitals in that part of the world. I went to Toronto General, and I've looked at one or two in the US as part of the preparation for this process. I'm happy to say it is now taking place.
So is that tied to NIDS? By the way, last question. Is that tied to NIDS?
It will. NIDS is a more holistic, overarching digitization of the society, where Jamaican citizens will have their unique identification number, and it will link into, all, if not most of the transactions that they do. So you will have a much better basis for planning, validation or verification of people to access, certain types of services, etc. NIDS will be far more all-encompassing. The health records is, of course, confined to the health system, but will tie into that, yes.
All right, so Dr. Tufton,
Yes, sir.
we just ask two more, make them just go on more faster, because some people want to ask you some question also. For this fiscal year, we notice them building a lot of highways, building a lot of roads and things, but we don't hear the hospital coming in with any burnt unit. Yes. We need burnt unit. What are you going to do about that? Because we really need some burnt unit around the country.
Right. So hospitals are able to treat burns, but the highest degree of burns require very highly complex and sophisticated equipment, and we don't have those equipment. So normally what we do is fly people out to other jurisdictions after we stabilize them. However, there is a need that has been advanced for a specialized burn unit. It's very expensive, and it requires professional specialist people. We have started that process. Petrojam is financing, for example, one at the University Hospital of the West Indies. It would not be feasible to have a burn unit, specialist burn unit, in multiple hospitals. But if we have one central in Jamaica, then it could work, because it's not that you get these kind of burns every day or every week. You get burns, but these are burns that can be treated. So to answer to your question is that we're working on one for University Hospital of the West Indies with funding from the government through Ministry of Health, but also through Petrojam. Petrojam, of course, is the oil.
They could just follow up with this too, because the other day you have a fireman get burnt. I saw that video and him end up die, right? And we see our next the brother were in Manchester in Mandeville, the gas station blew up. Him get burned, him die, and couple other people get burned and them just wipe out like that. So we really need the burnt unit like ASAP.
Well, I must tell you, and it sounds a little strong, but the level of burns that, let's say, that gas station person, that unfortunate situation with the gentleman who went to purchase gas and the station exploded in man. The level of burns that he got, the chances of survival would have been, very limited. Now, that's not to say we don't need the burn unit, but it's when you get to that level of burn, it becomes very, very challenging because your capacity to respond to it. But as I said, we're working on the burn unit, and we will have one in due course at the University Hospital.
And next thing we want to ask again about two bus crashes in Centon, I think, right? And a lot of people, broken bones and everything. And these people, them come and, them have to beg us overseas for some help for buying pins and things. What are you going to do for these people who cannot afford these things? And who have to reach out to the diaspora or put up what that thing name again, Jeffrey?
You're talking about GoFundMe?
GoFundMe. Right?
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people suffer with broken bones and them don't get pinned unless you have the money, the doctor not moving, the public hospital not supplying these things. What are you going to do about it? Because, yes.
Again, first of all, I want to express a lot of appreciation to the diaspora who have always risen to the occasion to give support. And it's a very good thing. So I don't want to discourage that. But the reality is that the public system does provide these kinds of support for broken bones, but you need to factor in the conversation. And I'm going to take on Westmoreland now, and hopefully Jeffrey won't get vexed with me. Right? The other day I went to Sub Hospital. Right, I'm a man on the road. I don't stay in office. I go out there, go see what's happening in the hospitals and the health centers. I just coming back from Centon in Monique with Lisa Hanna opening a new health center. But I went to Sub Hospital and I went on the male surgical ward. 80% of the beds on the male surgical wards were occupied by bike accident victims. Some of them lying beside each other who were both involved in head-on collision. They don't wear helmets, which is a legal requirement. Sorry again to sound, I'm not passing the book, but they drink the very strong concoction, the energy drink.
You mean the drunk, bro?
Well, you said, right? And they carry 3 and 4 people on the back of the bike because there's a big, strong bicycle culture, bike taxi culture there. Now, we have to respond to treat these persons. But frankly speaking, the demand on these things would be far less if we could get people to obey some of the rules of the road. Head-on collision between 2 bikes going in opposite direction on a wide stretch of roadways is more frequent than you think, and you wonder why and whether or not there's enough space, but it happens. So it's not that we don't provide these things, because we do, and we save many lives a year. But when a bike accident comes in, and there are about 3 or 4 per day, if you talk to Sub Hospital, it could tie up the doctor, the medical staff for 3-4 hours if they have head injuries and broken bones. And the demand is just very, very high. So we have to address the problem from the demand side and from the supply side. We may need to add more pins, but we also have to cut down on the demand for pins, which is why things like, the Road Traffic Act and so on are being reviewed to try and see how enforcement can reduce some of those things on the road. And it's an ongoing challenge, and it's a multi-sectorial, multi-stakeholder, multi-ministry type of approach.
With the road traffic, sorry to cut it, with the road traffic act, you're going to put some public awareness with it. They're going to put some.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the areas that I think, and this is not my area. I'm part of the government, but it's more Ministry of Transport and National Security. I think part of the challenge with the Road Traffic Act has been that we probably needed to talk a little more on it and get people to understand and appreciate the elements of it.
Education and awareness, yes.
Yes. I'm prepared to say that, even though it is a criticism of ourselves, but we have to accept those things and recalibrate and move on.
Ratty?
Yes, sir, Mr. Minister.
Yes, sir. You have a Malcolm X glasses there. No, don't give me the.
Me not Malcolm X frame my mind, man. Me not Malcolm X frame my mind. Listen, let me ask you this. You Jeffrey had posed some questions to you, and my good friend Herb followed up, and you just touched on it when you said passing the buck. Now let me ask you this. Well, let me say this. In my former world, the FBI, leadership was extremely important, and they made a distinction between leadership and management. Management would blame subordinates. Leadership would accept the blame. Now, a few months ago, I was on my way to New York, and I happened to just overhear a conversation between you and the interviewers over at Nationwide. And going back to what Jeffrey said, they were asking you about the deplorable conditions at some of the hospitals. And here's what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong. You said visitors, they're some of the they are a source of the problem, because they come in and they steal soap and this and that, and they break all of that stuff. I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe you also blame the patients, but you also blamed the hospital administrators, and you blame the regional hospital administrators. Not once did I hear you say, you know what? I'm the minister, Minister Christopher Tufton. This is my domain. This is my bailiwick. This is my province. I am completely responsible for anything. Even though I cannot be everywhere all the time, I am responsible because this is my domain, and I will see to it that these problems are fixed. You didn't say that. So let me ask you this. Do you see yourself as a manager or as a leader?
Okay, so in short answer to your question, I see myself in this role as both. I provide leadership at the level of policy. But unfortunately, I find myself every day almost micromanaging some of these issues. What you're calling on me to do is to micromanage. I think that's your general drift in terms of your line of argument. Because as a leader and a policymaker, which is my primary role, I am supposed to advance policy that is carried out by the technocrats and those who work within the system. As a manager, I have to go down and sit down with them and say, make sure you put a cleaning schedule on the bathroom door, make sure that you walk the floor every 1 hour, make sure that if the toilet seat is stolen, you replace it, that you ration the toilet paper. That's not my role. Now, I want you to be clear. I'm not suggesting that I don't have the overall responsibility to drive policy that gets the best value for money and that the people benefit. But I think it's unreasonable to say that the solution to unclean bathrooms is that the minister must go down and manage it and supervise it. What I would say is that the minister must review the policies that are associated with sanitary conveniences and the environment, and where necessary, adjust those policies so that those who are responsible will hopefully follow through with a more effective approach. And we did that. What I did, having spoken to the general problem, is to order an audit of all bathroom facilities, which was done. And those reports help to determine some new approaches which are being carried out. So, again, it is not so simple.
If I may, Mr. Minister, I wasn't suggesting that you micromanage, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. At one point, I was in charge of the intelligence division of the New York field office, the biggest intelligence division in the FBI. And we used to have regular meetings, and I've told this story several times before, but I don't think you've heard it, and I think this will drive the point home. And we used to have meetings every morning at 8 o'clock. And one morning when I was there, the chief, with all of my colleagues who were in charge of different areas, he asked a question, and I said to him that Mr. John Brown didn't give me the info, but I'll get the info from him, right? Because I'm driving policy. I'm not there micromanaging, making sure that everything is done. He cleared the room. And when he cleared the room, he left. He said, Rattigan, you stay behind. And he said to me, listen, you don't come here and blame people. He said, you are responsible. And so what you do at this table is you report, and if there's a deficiency, you go back and you deal with it. You take the blame. He said, you don't blame anyone. He said, because if we are to hold those people, if we're supposed to blame them, then we don't need you here. We should have had them here, and then we blame them. We talk to them. But he said, you are a leader, not a manager. And sir, let me just say to you, my culture is probably different than yours. Culture meaning that the professional culture. In the FBI, we see at a certain level, you are a leader, not a manager. We don't mix and match both of them. We said you're one or the other. And so maybe that's where we have a difference of opinion, because for us, we are held. And here's how they hold us to our duties. They said, you knew about it. If there's an issue, you knew about it, or because you're a leader, you should have known about it. And there's no escaping that. Now, let me just move on to one more thing.
But you can't get away with that. You can't just.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Wide sweeping statement and then just.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
It's like giving an uppercut and not allowing me to recover.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Give him a right cross.
Listen, as I said to you, that I do believe that I have had to play the role of leader and manager. And it's not the ideal role. And I don't know what the context of the FBI is. I've never been involved in it, obviously.
You don't want to be involved in it.
But I know in public health, I'm dealing with people and people at different levels. And there is more than just, it is complicated in many ways. You have lack of resources sometimes, not the right person in the right role because of limited capacity to hire and so on. So it does get complicated. I have never said that I ultimately am not in charge of public health. And I've been one of the most open ministers and indeed person willing to be always out there on the line of fire, taking all the hits and the criticisms, because I believe that you must expose yourself to that if you offer to lead. But the reality is that you work with a team, and that team has to be held accountable. I must tell you, one other thing about the difference between you and I don't have the authority to hire and fire as if I were running my own business. I don't know if you know the public service laws, but sometimes the way to change people is to promote them out of the position, not to promote them out of the organization. So sometimes you're working with square pegs in round holes, and it can be an added complication. It may not be all the time or most of the time, but some of the time. So
again, time is at a premium. Let me just ask you this one question, and I'll yield to the host and the rest of the panel. Now, let's just assume that you're because what I'm hearing is that you've been successful in doing a lot of things. And I'll give you credit for that. But we're all humans and we make mistakes. What I'd like you to do for this panel and for the people listening globally is this. Tell us the 2 top failures you have experienced since you've been at the ministry, and tell us why you ended up with them being failures, and what are you doing or what have you done to remedy the situation?
Well, I'd prefer to say any regrets that I've had, and I rarely have regrets because I see life as a learning experience. I think that Cornwall Regional Hospital, in the early stages of the challenge that we faced, we should have sought in a more decisive way external support to assess the problem and to rectify it. In other words, we depended too much on the local talent, and we ended up losing maybe a year and a half because of that, because we were fixing a problem that was a much bigger problem and maybe was not determined or couldn't be determined by the local capacities. I think we have right-sized that and we have learned a lot, but it is a regret of mine because I'd love to see Cornwall would have opened up already.
So that's one failure. What's the other one?
Well, during the COVID experience, believe it or not, this is very personal to me. The one event that made me shed a tear was the death of a young lady who didn't get attention sufficiently anyway, even though she was supposed to be seen by a private hospital because she was suspected of having COVID and ended up going to 2 other public hospitals and eventually died at the University Hospital of the West Indies. And it really hurt me because this is someone who was being treated as a COVID patient who really never had COVID. And it triggered a lot of changes in the response to how we applied testing and how we dealt with the kind of emergency cases during the COVID period. And ultimately, I have to take the responsibility, as you say, as a leader in this case, because it had implications for policy changes. So those would be 2 things that I've regretted, and but I've tried to learn from those.
Those are the top 2.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't mention the scheme though, the health thing that you mentioned in 2018, but that's okay. Other people are here waiting to ask questions.
I think depending on how you define health insurance, we have expanded significantly quality access to a number of services in healthcare.
Yeah, but there's a difference between access and insurance, though. And you and I, we know this.
Yeah, but we can't offer, a government can't offer the kind of insurance that the private sector offers. So
but you promised it in 2018. You promised it in 2018.
What we said we needed was a national insurance program. Insurance really means putting in place a system for a need to be satisfied when you need it. The external work, the outsourcing of diagnostic is a form of insurance, but we can debate that point.
Okay.
The important thing is that the public has better services in some of the areas.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Jeffrey, before you come in, make this one person here, just make a call, very important. Go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, Mr. Tufton.
Yes, sir.
When somebody like me who go into the hospital and get overdose medicine, right, and then we get a retinal detachment, and now me suffer a high condition where it cost me $1.3 million. What you gonna do about, what the government gonna do about people like me who suffer a retinal detachment, or if they lose a eye and can't find the money? What kind of help there is a person like me?
But
well,
just
first of all, so I'm very sorry to hear about that. Where mistakes are made, and they are made. I've seen the files on a number of complaints. There is a recourse for a patient like yourself. Firstly, there's an internal investigation that's triggered where the authority above whoever did the work would assess and determine if the doctor was at fault or what the situation is, and appropriate compensation is made. If the person, if yourself or others don't get what you perceive to be justice from that, you're entitled to take it all the way up to the courts. And the courts can in fact award. So for example, this 1.something million that you paid, if the doctor erred on that procedure, you shouldn't be paying that. A lawyer would have ensured that the government takes up that cost. And we pay out thousands of dollars, millions indeed, every year for cases. They're not publicized, but it happens. There's a small percentage of cases. It happens in America, it happens everywhere. So the short answer is that you have a recourse internally and through the courts of the country, and you can pursue that.
Right. All right. Jeffrey, couple more calls coming in and out. Jeffrey?
Yes. Minister, do you think that spending, something was brought to me a while ago, spending money to reinforce or refurbish KPH or say, Cornwall Regional Hospital, the government has squandered billions of dollars, both sides of the aisle, over the years in this country. Don't you think it's time for Jamaica to build up a modern hospital?
Yes, and we're doing just that. So we really should be commended for that. Since we're getting all the blame for everything else, White Wilfred, We're building.
Hold on. We can't let that go.
No, but it's a serious question. It's a serious question. And I think you're right in many respects. The truth is that we have been penny wise and pound foolish in public health. I'm the first to accept that. We have had these old buildings. We have not maintained them. Some of them we have had the useful life. A building is supposed to give you 50 years, properly maintained. After that, you have to look at knocking it down and replacing it. Cornwall Regional is 52 or 53 years. And of course, if you go to KPH, it's 200 plus years. So by right, many of these buildings should have been replaced. We just have not done this. What we have done instead is patch. A leaking pipe, you fix it. A leak somewhere else, you fix it, that kind of thing. I don't think we should shy away from that. Reality is true. This government, since the 7 years ago, have embarked on the most comprehensive hospital infrastructure build-out than any other government post-independence. 6-story building at Spanish Town. If you go to Spanish Town, we're clearing the ground now to break ground for that, which will have modern operating theaters. It's almost like a new hospital, even though it's a new wing, we'll still keep a couple of the more modern buildings. Western Children is a brand new hospital. Granted, it is a gift of the Chinese government. That's an 8-story building for people up to 18 years. Cornwall is going to be a new hospital. I'm prepared to say that because of the expenditure. And we're looking at something along the belt between Portmore and Old Harbour where a lot of development is taking place. In addition to that, we're doing a lot of health centers. We're building out a new one in Old Harbour, $500+ million, St. Jago, Portmore, and a couple other places. So we're really trying, we're making the best effort now to right size our hospital infrastructure, because you're right, we have been patching, and that has not been adequate and really hasn't served the people well.
Another question, Minister. I know maybe the question has been asked before, but maybe I should ask it a different way. We allow our nurses to leave our health sector and go overseas. Is there any way you as minister, before the next election call, because they keep on saying, call it, Andrew, call it. Before the next election call, do you or can you create a package for our nurses, a well-paid package for our nurses that is so attractive that they don't want to leave Jamaica? Because the fact of the matter is, successful government and successful government has continued to ignore the health sector when it comes on to paying our nurses and our doctors. So can you, Minister Tufton, tell the people of Jamaica tonight and the diaspora that you will ensure to have a proper pay package for our nurses and our doctors in this country?
Okay, so first of all, I've looked at the reasons why nurses migrate and looked at it in a more sort of scientific way. There are 3 reasons. One is security of tenure. It's not all pay, where nurses have been on contract and they're not entitled to pension. We had too many of them in the system that way. We have since lobbied for and worked with the government, Ministry of Finance, Cabinet, to establish 1,500 new posts, permanent posts. And we're now building that out to try and address that problem. The other is working conditions. I told you about the build out of new hospitals to try and improve that. The third is compensation. The government is now embarked on the biggest compensation review in modern times. And what you'll find is that the nurses are going to be very happy with that, because they're going to consolidate a lot of the compensation around a particular number of hours per week. They'll still be able to do extra time through sessions, but the overall salary package will improve. Now, I cannot tell you that you can compete with America, because I'm telling you, they are spending monies that we don't have, but it will be a lot better and combined with improved working condition and security of tenure. The fourth one is housing, so it's 4, which we are working on some possibilities for that. I think we will have better retention, but I also feel that if we add the flexi contract, and this is not a policy yet, this is just Chris Tufton articulating a new dimension to it. where a nurse, like an unskilled laborer, like a farm worker, for example, who is more unskilled, can move from here to there and come back. I would prefer to share the services of a nurse than not to have them at all. And I think that's where we need to move towards in the future to improve retention. And we're working on that.
One more question before I yield to the goodly Wayne Lonesome. Minister, why is it that when members of the diaspora decide to send like an ambulance or health apparatus like beds and so forth, why do they have so much red tape? And if they do send it out, it's sent to the ministry and then the whole container unload and it gone like Sammy Mouth.
This is your second very extreme comment that you have made tonight. You say we don't have no medication at comprehensive clinic.
Minister,
hold on, let me answer the question. First of all, we cherish the donation and contribution of the diaspora. Today I had an adapter clinic program at the Red Hills Road Sunshine Health Center with Nigel Clark, who's the MP, where a gentleman from the UK adopted that clinic. It's a program that we have where a person can adopt a clinic, normally where they grew up, and basically be a foster parent to help that facility. And I want to commend that to your audience. Now, what has been the problem in the past is that people send stuff back without any regard for the age of the item, whether it's outdated, arrangements for custom clearance. If it is not shipped in a charity name, you don't get the waivers and the taxes and so on. So what we did over the last few years is to establish an NGO within the ministry. So we have our own wellness foundation. We have a website that is to be launched soon. You get in touch with us, you indicate what you're shipping, and we help you to clear. So we overcome some of those barriers that you talk about. As it relates to the stealing of the stuff, I don't know that there's a lot of that happening. I've not had reports of it. If it happens, it's an outlier. But if someone ships and said this must go to Cornwall Regional or Spanish Town or to a particular group, we will work with them on that. And I tell you, we have seen some of the most amazing projects with the diaspora. There is a Shackleton Hospital. I don't know if any of you are from Clarendon, Northern Clarendon. One diaspora member contributed $1 million US. The government matched it. And we have spent $300 million. And if you go to Chapelton now, Northern Clarendon, you see a brand new hospital, meaning it's renovated, 50 beds, emergency care, really nice. And that was a direct collaboration with Beverly Nichols and our foundation out of New York and the government. So we've had several of those that are working. And what we have to do is build on it.
All right. Jeffrey, a lot of people in diaspora, them listening and them want to just make them look the same. So let's take the phone. Go ahead, Carla.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Tufton. I have two questions. I will hang up and then I will hang up and you can go ahead and answer after. My first question is, not really a question. About 15 years ago, I had an injury to the left eye in which I had a cataract. And I went to KPH to get the cataract off my eye. And I was also left with a detachment of the back of the eye. Presently, I can't even see from that eye. How can I go ahead in probably getting some reasonable information or feedback from the hospital or from even you personally in which I can go further if there is any compensation for that, or maybe I can do something for me to be able to see from my left eye. The next question is, it is alleged that you are the CEO of a company that is selling bad rice to the Jamaican people. So, as a doctor, I am going to say that you're a doctor by profession and not by, So, what is the reasonable statistics behind that of you as a doctor, a professional, doing, trying to preserve the health of the people, but at the end of the day, you're selling bad rice to gain from it? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's a professional doctor.
Let me address.
Yes.
Let me address the first question. 15 years is a long time. I don't know if the gentleman is still in Jamaica or he's abroad in the diaspora. I don't know which hospital it is. But as I said earlier, there is a grievance procedure that he can trigger. He could get a lawyer. I don't have the details. If he sends me his information, I can check. But I don't know if any files are there after 15 years. The paper-based file system can be unreliable. And I don't know, a lawyer would have to tell him whether or not he's still entitled to compensation. So I would say to him, me to just talk to him lawyer and have him lawyer get in touch with the hospital. And if there's a problem, they can get directly in touch with me and I'll try to facilitate it. Because I'm about seeking recourse where people have been done badly. I'm fully supportive of that because the system will only maintain credibility if there are checks and balances and appropriate accountability. So I would say, let me hear. Now on the second question, from when I waited on somebody to ask me that question, because I have deliberately kept out of it the 4 or 5 articles that I've seen in the Gleaner newspaper, highly irresponsible, I may say. And I'm saying it very calmly, not angrily, very calmly, for a report that has provided an insinuation that somehow I am involved in an entity that is bringing in unhealthy products for human consumption. It is inaccurate, it is false, and it was and has been a very misleading thing. Now it's being dealt with. The minister, first of all, I'm not the CEO of the company, I'm a shareholder. And I'm a shareholder for many companies. I don't know if you all know what a politician earns, but if anybody think I can send my children to school earning on a politician's salary, then we have a misunderstanding. And I don't steal taxpayers' money. I work for what I have. So I have to find ways while I give free service, which is what government service is, to survive. Having said that, I'm not a director of the company. I'm a shareholder. The company is run by my son, and he does a few things. And my son has a degree in finance and is perfectly qualified and observe the rules of engagement like anybody else. What happened in this case was that he brought in a product out of one of the Caribbean countries, Suriname, several package containers before, no problem. This particular one, the customs, as it is their right to do, asked for a particular inspection. They did, and they released the product. They released it, having inspected. And then I'm hearing, based on correspondence between him and them over a period of time, that somehow he was allowed to sell quote unquote bad rice. Well, the reality is, as confirmed by the Minister of Commerce, Minister Urban Hill recently, nearly 200 companies in Jamaica import the same quality rice, because what they call bad rice is the breakage, 20% breakage. So there is the perfectly shaped rice, and then there's a breakage quantity. You're allowed up to a certain point. There's some rule that says 10%, but in Jamaica, we have practiced 20%. And all other companies, not one, not two, over 150, nearly 200, import the same 20% breakage. And this journalist decided to identify one company, probably the smallest company, to make multiple headlines out of and to create an impression that somehow we did something unjust. And it is unfair, it is unjust, and it is misleading. And, I left it without getting involved because I didn't want to give an impression that somehow I was seeking any unfair advantage because of my position. And I think the Minister of Industry dealt with it appropriately. I'm just unfortunate sometimes when you say these things, it create damage, and it's damage that you can't correct over time. But that's the price to pay for being a public figure.
Yes, Dr. Tufton. I could take a next call from a next caller from in the diaspora. Go to caller.
Good night to the panel, Minister.
Night, sir.
Yes, sir. The question comes from something I heard last year, stated by the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang. Yes. He stated that members of the security forces should shoot to kill when confronted by gunmen. And he stated that his reason for saying that was because they're taking off a lot of human resources or resources in the public health facility. I would love to hear your feedback on that. if that's the policy of you and the ministry and Jamaica, as well as the PTSD issue that Mr. Herb spoke on. I would humbly ask that you really do a review on it to see how it is being actually done in the Jamaica as relates to treating with the persons and so forth. I'll listen to the answer. Thank you.
Dr. Tufton, this is a man who's serving on. He's a detective inspector. He's in the diaspora now, but detective inspector, right? From Jamaica.
Well, we're happy for his service, and we hope that he's enjoying his life. I can't give you the nuances of the shoot to kill statement, but it did generate a lot of discussion, controversy even. I can only interpret from my vantage point what the minister meant. Basically, we live in a high and very violent prone society. Those who choose a life of criminality are very armed and very dangerous. You've seen gun finds recently, high-powered weapons that kill, easily. And I think the statement, my interpretation of it, I can't interpret it for them, the minister can clarify it, was that if you are in a position where you are being challenged by someone with a high-powered weapon, where your life is at stake, then you have to defend yourself. Now, I don't know anybody who is going to aim for a leg. If they see a M16 pointed at their face, they're going to aim for the biggest part of the body, where they can make a connection to defend themselves and indeed to defend the laws of the country. So I suspect that's the interpretation, my interpretation of it anyway. I mean, the response should be measured and equivalent to the aggression that is confronting you. I don't think he meant that if somebody is breaking a traffic light or even being boisterous and abusive, you must take out a gun and shoot them. Clearly, he could not have meant that, and I'm prepared to say he didn't. But where you're at risk with a high-powered weapon, it's difficult to be measured to a point where you may actually compromise your own life, not to mention the laws that you're sworn to protect the people.
Okay, I could take a next call. I could take a next call, Dr. Tufton. Cause time running up. Yes, caller.
Hello?
Yes, man. Talk, caller. Go ahead.
Good evening to you and your panel.
Yes.
And good evening to Dr. Tufton.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Turn on your TV.
I'm a concerned live in.
I think you have to turn off your radio.
Turn on your TV.
Yeah, not here. Yeah.
No, I just step away from it.
Yes.
I said I'm a concerned citizen living Central, Gutierrez, to be frank.
Mm.
And I'm doing a project in the Renarabia area.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a worker. He get jumped by a nail, jump off a scaffold and get jumped by a nail. And when I take him to the St. Anne's Bay Hospital, we have to spend at least an hour and a half before we get somebody to look at me. Like a nurse, it wasn't a doctor, it was a nurse. And the nurse said he would have to go to see a private doctor because their hands are full.
Mm-hmm.
I take him to a private doctor, that would be in Ocherest, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And he get looked after. And the doctor say he can go either by the clinic or by the hospital to get some form of dressing or checkup. And each time that he go there, they say they cannot help him because they don't have the necessary, I don't know if it is injection or whatever. And right now the man foot swell bad on him. And yesterday I have to send him back to the private doctor. So I am asking this question, Dr. Tufton. I've been hearing how much money is spending in the health
And I have seen it because even in Runaway Bay, there's a little clinic there when you pass your morning time and so much pregnant woman out there in the sun. I don't know if you know of that. Right?
What health center is that again? Sorry.
So where is it? Where is it?
It is in the Runaway Bay area at the Carnival, right beside the gas station that leads you in front of.
All right, hang up and make him answer the question. Yeah,
Dr. Tufton, just give me 1 minute before you answer the question. Wayne, I have to go. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me on, Dr. Tufton.
Yes.
We will talk. Thank you for coming on, sir. I have to go to another program that I'm hosting.
And next time you're in the grill, you shout me, okay?
I will. As a matter of fact, I'll try and get your number from Mr. Lonesome.
Yeah, man, that's cool. Not a problem.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, man.
All right. That Runaway Bay Health Center is slated for a major renovation. In fact, we're building a new health center there. But in relation to the problem with that patient, I'd love to get the proper details. And I'll send mine, ask Mr. Lonesome to WhatsApp me your details. Let me find, because we do have problems like that from time to time, and we have to fix those problems. So I'll not challenge you on what you're explaining is tantamount to some levels of neglect of that particular condition. And I'd be happy to check on that. I have a radio program actually where I get a lot of these calls every Friday on RGR at 10:30 to 11, called On the Pulse with Public Health, where I just allow people to call in and tell me what the problems are. I believe in that. But what I'll say quickly is that there is a triage process in accident and emergency, where if 10 people come in, it don't matter who come first or second, is who have the most life-threatening illness. So if a man come in with a gunshot wound to him head or him chest, and another one come with a nail in him foot, chances are you may get a tetanus shot for the nail in the foot, but you're going to see more time spent with the man with the gunshot wounds. And in a high trauma society, many people get pushback. That's the problem with elective surgeries, because there's always an emergency to tend to. So I suspect that your friend may have been not dealt with as urgently because it wasn't perceived by the nurse to be as urgent, and she may have other cases. But I do agree with you that over time, the person should have gotten the treatment to resolve the problem and solve the problem.
Okay. Ratty, anything else? Because we're wrapping up now,
Mr. Minister, quick thing. You mentioned mental health. It's a timely, relevant topic. And with Wayne's permission, I'll say to the general public that tomorrow on Reason with Rattigan on www.reggae Global Radio, we will have a mental health professional who will discuss this topic. Now, there are 4 things, but I'm not going to ask you them. I just want to throw them out so you can think about them, because you're going to come back, I'm sure. Shaggy said he doesn't want to give the government the money that he raised from his performances with his friends. That's one issue. The second issue is, you don't have to answer any of them. I'm just throwing them out to you because time is at a premium. You talk about all these buildings, but you also talk about shortage of staff. So I'm saying, okay, when you build all of these buildings, how are you going to staff them? Third thing is at the JLP conference, and this is very important. At the JLP conference, the Prime Minister said, I'm not quoting him, I'm paraphrasing him. He said that he received lots of complaints about the Ministry of Health. He was talking about your sector. And he said they were all justified. Do you remember that?
Not really, but that's fine.
Well, there's no reason why you should anyway, because it's a demerit. But he did say that. I listened to him carefully. He said that he received lots of complaints about the Ministry of Health and that they were all justified. And then he went on to talk about you and the good work you're doing. Now, here's the thing. Let me be absolutely clear. I want to see you succeed, sir. I don't care about politicians and party, and I care about the poor people. And if you succeed, by extension, Jamaica is going to provide better medical attention for all of our people. And that's what I care about. And if I sound like I'm a little bit harsh on you regarding the leadership and things, I want you to be better, right? And also, your achievements, when we talk about them, I try not to focus on them. You know why? Because that's what you're paid to do. That's what you were elected to do. And so it's a sad state when we start lauding people because they're doing what they're supposed to do. That means the other people are not doing what they're supposed to do, by and large, and they're complete failures. So I just want to say, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope I can get some more questions in, but again, Wayne just, he's running a tight ship here and time is at a premium. So I just throw those things out. I threw those things out to you. At any point, you can comment on them.
So Wayne, I don't mind going over a few minutes if you want to, but
Yes,
let me just say a couple of things. First of all, I appreciate the questions, and I don't have a problem with probing questions. That's my career, that's my life, and it's fine. And then no offense taken, I don't take it personal. I appreciate also the well wishes, because the truth is we need a little of that too, and a little encouragement. And I know that you're right. People normally don't mention achievements, they mention challenges or perceived failures. So despite all that we do, we mustn't enter this thing expecting praise. We must always expect critical evaluation and so on. Now, on the issue of Shaggy, first of all, I commend Shaggy on his efforts. I commend him on his talent. I commend him on, all the achievements that he has had. We're proud to identify with him as a Jamaican who has done well. The particular issue of the fundraiser for the Bustamante Hospital for Children is one that was done with great collaboration involving a number of people, not just Shaggy, not just the other performers. The OPM provided the grounds for the event, people volunteered services and so on. And all of that, of course, was built on the need to provide support to the institution. At no point has the government asked Shaggy for the money. So I don't know where that miscommunication came from. What we have said is that, and I said it personally to Shaggy, that we should try and find a way, if there are concerns about accountability of expenditure, where he appoints the appropriate persons and we get the job done of the money being spent for the reasons for which it was raised. And that has been our position, my position all along. It's no different from Beverly Nichols, who donated $1 million US and gave it to the Southern Regional Health and went down and cut the ribbon for the brand new hospital that was built with that $1 million plus our $1 million equivalent. So I don't know where that misunderstanding is coming from, and I'd love to clear it up. Right now, the chairman of the hospital, Mr. Kenny Benjamin of Guardsman fame, very respectable businessman, is now having a dialogue with Shaggy and his team for that resource to be used appropriately. And I hope it will come to a happy conclusion. I'm not getting involved because, again, it has been clouded by all sorts of misinterpretations. So hopefully that will come to a good end. I'm not even remembering what the other two issues were, but if you remember, I can respond to them.
No, quickly, one of them is you're talking about all these brand new shiny buildings.
Yes, the HR. So what we have been doing is building out a HR plan to determine what the needs will be in another year and a half when these buildings are completed. And you are right. I know of hospitals being built in some years ago. Trinidad was one, I think St. Lucia may have been the other, where the hospital finished and they couldn't staff it, so it couldn't function. HR is the bottleneck, is the weakness in public health, not just in Jamaica, but globally. And we're going to have to make a lot more deliberate attempt to deal with filling those spots. And I met 2 weeks ago, I met with the nursing council, the medical council, to discuss issues around standard and accreditation, training, joint training. It's something that I've been taking on because we're going to need to fill those spots by training more people, but can only do it through collaboration. And I commend you on the mental health program because it is a big problem. Focus a lot on the destigmatization. People need to understand that it's okay to feel depressed. It's okay to feel lonely. It's okay to feel in a space where you feel like you need help. And it's okay to seek help. Because the biggest problem with mental health is when people suffer in silence or they're ostracized because they appear to have a problem. And that is what is creating and amplifying the problem.
I'm just take this call. Make a take a call from the diaspora. Carl, I got you.
Yes, I just want Minister Tufton, thank you for coming on. You know me very well, but you remember, my face is not there, but maybe you remember my voice, but that's okay. I just want to ask you, you have said at least 10 times tonight that the diaspora is so valuable to Jamaica.
Are you the only minister of government who believes that to be so? And because we have been asking, and we would like to know why they have not done a comprehensive approach towards the diaspora to assist you in health or crime or anywhere. It has not been done, and people are backing away from it. Can you please explain that to me, Minister Tufton? And this is Dr. Francis.
Hi, Doctor. Yes, how are you? No, I really don't accept that I'm the only person who says this. And in fact, I think the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Camilla Johnson-Smith, has spent through her missions abroad a lot of time interfacing with the diaspora. Alician Roach in New York, the other members, Mayor in Florida, for example, Ramakan, who was in London. Indeed, I'll declare interest. My sister, who is a career diplomat, who is now head of the Canada Ottawa office, has been for 20 odd years in the diplomatic service. They all work together to try and bring the diaspora together, and there are groups that are well organized. I think the diaspora is not a one size fits all.
Minister, yes. I'm not talking. I know all of that, Minister. Sorry to butt in, but I know all that. But Minister, I am here to disagree with you vehemently because I have seen you here. I've seen you, and I know what you do. I know who you do in terms of making those outreaches. But the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's a failure. An absolute abject failure. And we in Jamaica need the assistance. We need the help of the diaspora. And somehow they take us as second-class citizens. Why is that so? Can you please explain that to me?
Well, the point of difference that we have is that I know of the efforts of the minister. I know of the efforts of her team, Audrey Marks in Washington and others. And I think they make a gallant effort. Now, I think where there are differences, what there needs to be is dialogue. And we know we have the Diaspora Conference that takes place every couple of years in Jamaica. And hopefully the leadership of the diaspora can express where they think those differences are. I don't think the gaps are that wide, to be honest with you. I embrace the health space because we need you. And to some extent, you need us because you recruit a lot from us. So that mutual need must facilitate collaboration, dialogue, and working together. But I think it could expand to every other area because COVID has taught us that the world is one place and a rising tide will lift all boats and the weakest link makes all of us vulnerable. So, sir, where you have specific concerns, what I would say is that you should make those known, but be specific about it. And if it's a conversation that needs to be had, I am pretty sure that the Minister of Foreign Affairs and her team will be willing to entertain that. And I've seen her do a lot of it in the past as a colleague at the cabinet level.
I got a question for you there.
Yes, finish, Doctor.
Dr. Tufton, I thank you for your answer. But I have spoken directly I was on the board myself with the minister for years. You know exactly, I don't know if you know who I am, but you should know that. Right? I'm the captain. Yes, the same one that you and I talk to all the time. And the fact of the matter is that a lot more can be done, and they are doing avoidance. They're not doing it. And I am telling you, you are one of the few that are doing it. So take the kudos as you get it. I am telling you, if they do what you do, maybe Jamaica will be a better place and be in the diaspora. But we are not going to stop. We are going to continue. Rattigan and Herb and Jeffery and so on, and we will not stop. Because we know that Jamaica can be a better place if we all work together for one accord. Thank you very much for your opportunity for answering my question, Brother Tufton. You're doing a good job.
Have a good night, sir. We will keep trying, and I know my colleague ministers will also keep trying. It's a work in progress always.
All right, next caller. Hello? Oh. Yes, hello? Hold on. Yes, hello? Hello? No, pick him up. Hold on. Yeah, just call back. Call me back right away, yeah? Just mix that call.
Wayne, where are you located?
My turn, Wayne.
Just one minute. Make us take this caller, yeah? Yes, caller. Yes, Blue.
Yes, let me ask the minister something.
Yes, man, talk, man. I'm hearing.
Good night, Mr. Minister, Dr. Tufton, Wilfred Rattigan, Herb, big up on yourself. Mr. Minister, just a quick question. Them said ambulance is better than an hand cart. And the other day I saw like about 6 ambulances or so was donated to one of them hospitals out west. My thing is just a suggestion to you, sir. I think you should get some better equipped ambulances. Those are okay, but to the level of traumas that we have in Jamaica, gunshot wounds and life-threatening injuries, I think better equipped ambulance with proper gurneys inside of them will help to save many lives on the way to the hospital. And another thing, could you, maybe it's not your area, but the police, when they engage with criminals in the street or wherever people get gunshot, we don't see where them just take them up, throw them in the back of one like they're garbage and stuff like that. I mean, some of these guys' life can be saved and we can get information from them pertaining to what you gonna do about that, sir? Hang up and
listen. Yes, okay.
Okay. So I don't know if you have seen what equipment are in some of these ambulances that we have designed here locally, working with some of the car dealers here. We've done it because it is more cost effective. Those vehicles tend to be built for the Jamaican roads. The roads are not always in the best condition. It costs millions less than importing one. And they still have the equipment to save lives. Part of that is equipment, part of that is the personnel, the emergency personnel. Do we have enough? No. Why don't we have enough? Because the high levels of trauma in the country on a per capita basis far superior to, supersedes many other jurisdictions. We are a high trauma society. Road accidents last year claimed was close to 400.
Over 400.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly. And some of the mistakes that people make, you wonder whether they have them licensed or not. So it puts the system under a lot of pressure, and we just have to make do with what we can to provide that support. But, I don't know that we are missing equipment. I could check to see. You're raising a point that I'm willing to look at, but that's my view. And the issue of people being thrown in trucks and pickup and so on when they get shot, we have a position in public health where every life is treated equally. And indeed, if 2 gangsters shoot up each other and they end up at KPH where they normally do if they're in the Kingston corporate area, and a law-abiding citizens come in with a nail in the foot, we're going to go for the gangsters and save their lives because they are more serious. We don't ignore them because they are gangsters, as much as we are displeased that they are there because of deviant behavior. And that has always been the case. But how they get to the hospital, we don't always have control over that, as you know. So if it's a shootout and police apprehend and are taking them, when they can get an ambulance, they will, but more often than not, they may be placed lying down in the back of a pickup and are brought there, and we try our best to deal with it. I don't know. I can't give you a better answer than that.
All right, Dr. Tufton, what we're saying right here, it'd be a good idea if you start place some of these ambulances at the fire station. Them get an emergency.
We do,
they can move. You do?
Yes, we have an emergency response system that involves fire. And there are a couple of fire stations that actually have ambulances. I think Portmore is one, and I think there are 1 or 2 others. Not all of them. And you're right, all of them should have. But what they would do is coordinate. So if an ambulance is going to the scene of an accident or, for whatever reason, there are suspected patients there, the relationship between the fire department and the emergency response at the hospital level, health, and the ambulance would fall under local government, would coordinate to ensure that they get the necessary support at that level. So it's coordinated, not always physically present.
Okay, let's take a next call. Caller?
Yes, good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Dr. Tufton, I hear you say something. It may home with me. You say your salary, what you take home, cannot do nothing much. Will you imagine a person working $9,000 a week? Oh, that it?
I think that is illegal because it's below the minimum wage. So whoever is paying you that,
She hang up and listen for the answer. Yes.
Oh, I was saying that sounds like it below the minimum wage, so they really shouldn't be paying you that. No, I'm not. I wasn't making the point to suggest that I am the worst off. I give God thanks every day for what I have, the little that I have, and I give a lot of free service, and yes, I get a salary every month, and I think I deserve it. And I do have obligations like everybody else, and I know there are many people who are less fortunate than me. And part of government is to improve the lives of those who are less fortunate. So I can't argue with you on the fact that you are less fortunate based on what your salary package is. It doesn't change the obligations that I have, though, or yours. I have children. I have obligations that require of me to support them. So the ambition of every policymaker, me included, is to lift the lives of everybody. And health and good health is a big enabler. Education is another one. But to the extent that you're earning that amount of money, it sounds to me that you need to have a conversation with the employer, because I agree with you. A livable wage would be far more than that. And I believe that is below the minimum wage. And the minimum wage is just a guide. We're not saying that people must pay minimum wage. We're saying that they mustn't go below it. But ideally, they should pay more and pay what people deserve and what they earn and what the value they create. So it wasn't intended to create the impression that I am not better off than a lot of people.
Okay, Herb, we're going to wrap up now. So Herb and Rattigan, just close out, yeah? Herb?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Tufton, the key thing that we spoke about earlier was electronic records and possibly the doctors doing video calls to patients.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any risk analysis on the cyber situation that you face from cyber attacks, phishing, ransomware? Have you been presented with the absolute dangers with cybersecurity?
Right. That's one of the biggest risk with going digital, cybersecurity. And health data is very confidential data, as you know, and the ministry and the government has done well over the years to keep confidential health data. Nobody should know what your health profile is unless you want to give it to them, right?
Right.
So the system we're putting in place has several features around security, and it's a requirement. It was assessed in determining who is the provider of the service. A lot of the data is stored within the government system, so no private entity will have your data. eGov, which is in the Ministry of Technology, Minister Tavares being the minister, has a center where that data is stored under lock and key, highly secure space. But you're right, every single day, and I saw a presentation of it by that unit some years ago, where you track the attacks on the country coming from outside of the country, not just internally, on banks, financial institutions, and indeed, we have had a cyber attack recently in Southeastern Regional Health Authority, where our system was shut down for a few days and a ransom was required or requested. We didn't pay the ransom, we got the experts to come and we were able to retrieve and so on. The Office of the Prime Minister reported in the public domain the other day that they had a cyber attack. Banks have it. It's a hazard of this kind of technology embracing. But the truth is, it's a risk that's worth it, because with good technology, you get much better service, faster transaction time, less cost, people get better care. And it's a risk that we mitigate against with the security features that we put in place. And we're aware of that.
Now, back in 2018, we had actually come down the task force, the crime task force, Diaspora Task Force. And we had introduced to the government the idea of an enterprise architecture where there's a star system and every government agency, to include the police and the military, would have been on that one system. And you would have cloud support and other type support. Now, within the biggest threat usually is insider threat. That means somebody on the inside of, say, your ministry headquarters could be on the internet playing around and open up the wrong document. And bingo, you have a worm or something that's opened up and starts transmitting your information out. Or it could be the mere fact that they themselves could deliberately open up things from the inside. Are you concerned about that? Have you seen any issues from the insider threat within people giving out information, medical or highly qualified government information from inside the ministry?
Fortunately, I have not had any incidents such as this during my tenure. What you have to guard against is the need for people to be trained and not allow lack of training to cause people to make these kinds of errors. Because a lot of time it's errors. If it's deliberate, it's against the law. People can be prosecuted. But also the way the security ecosystem is set up, and I'm not an expert on cybersecurity, but based on what I know, there are layers of security access. So if you're a lower level employee, you have access to a point, then more advanced, and you go up as you go along. And persons who have higher levels of access are vetted and trained at a higher level, which altogether minimizes the risk that you speak about. So the risk is always going to be there, but I think we do our best to try and mitigate against it, as is the case in other jurisdictions. But even with that, I'm sure you've heard of breaches at all levels: Twitter breach, Instagram breach, people personal account breach. We just have to keep monitoring and looking at new ransom software that comes out and try to mitigate against it.
Okay, Ratty.
Okay.
Wrapping up. Yeah, Ratty.
Yeah, three quick things. Mr. Minister, I've served several years in an official capacity or diplomatic capacity for the U.S. government all over the world, several countries. And I know a little bit about diplomacy and diaspora affairs. And I can say without apology, and you and I may differ on this, but I'm giving you the benefit of my experience because I've worked with the Jamaican high commissions and embassies all over the world during my tenure. I can say without apology that this Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is an abject failure, and it's run by rank amateurs. And I say that another time you and I will discuss, and I'll give you examples. Second thing is, you said that the ambulances were built for Jamaican roads. Why aren't police vehicles built for Jamaican roads? And the third thing is, you mentioned about when we talked about the dead infants, you said that the problems were fixed, but you didn't tell us whether or not what caused the problem and the prevention. What you're going to do about it in the future, and what kind of protocols you were going to put in place to prevent this from happening again.
Okay. I noticed that your questions come in threes. Okay. Your favorite number.
No, I'm not trying to get in as much as we can.
First of all, obviously, I'm disagreeing with you on the characterization of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Minister Johnson Smith and her team, I think, works hard. I mean, she's really dedicated to her work. She works very hard. She's always on a plane. I don't know how she does it. I don't know if I could manage it. And she's always striving to improve the relations. I mean, we just have to keep talking about it and try to improve where there are gaps, which is why I say a dialogue is important, where this perception is. On the issue of the police cars on the Jamaican roads, we do buy the cars are for the Jamaican roads, and I'm not giving the impression that all the Jamaican roads are bad, because we have seen a lot of improvements, a lot of highways being built across administration over the last decade or more. So the only issue with the ambulance I was making is that these Toyota type make vehicles, which are the ones that we use primarily, were built for the developing world. They're not necessarily Jamaica, but the developing world, and their shock system and so on tends to be a little better, and so handle the roads a little better, the maneuvering, the size can go into smaller streets, that kind of thing. So that's the point I was making. The third one, which is an important one, the one about the recommendations, the Victoria Jubilee Hospital scenario. We did the biggest challenge that gave rise to all the other issue, from my perspective, was the ratio of nurse to babies. So what the WHO report said, which our internal people said before that report came, was that you had a situation where you had one nurse, specialist nurse, to 8 babies. The standard is 1-to-1 or 1-to-2. Now, put yourself in a context here now where this is a highly fragile environment. These babies are already sick. That's why they're in this neonatal intensive care. They are very fragile. Some of them are as small as they can fit in the palm of your hand. And they require constant attention. We don't have the personnel because of the reasons I gave. So when you have one nurse for 8 babies and they have to give constant attention, sometimes they don't change the protective gear. Rightfully, they should only be dealing with one. So you get cross-contamination. They pick up something from one place, put it to the other place. They don't put the medication where they're supposed to put it because they're rushing from one child to the next. So they're sanitizing. So everything gets compromised because of that human resource element and the shortage of it. The other is the space that was identified, where the cots are located. They're supposed to be a distance between. Because of the overcrowding, they're closer. So between the shortage of staff and the shortage of space, it leaves the environment ripe for that. Now, what are we doing about that? Clearly, we're trying to see how we can get more people. That's a very difficult challenge. We're expanding some additional room space. During COVID, we had to convert some of the neonatal space to COVID wards that were built in particular by the EU, called under PROMAC. That's a designation of the thing. We built out a number of them in a number of hospitals. We can now reoccupy those, which will create greater space. And then we have to move around with the personnel. And then we have to train. We have to train and retrain. So people have to be reminded that even with a stressful environment, they must change the protective gear when they move from one baby to the next. A lot more effort because there are a lot more babies, but they need to be reminded of that. So those things have been put in place, and hopefully it will lead to a better outcome in the future. All right.
Well, we're going to wrap up now, because we see we're going over, 2 hours, but we're going to wrap it back again.
It's a test series, not a one day match.
Yeah, well, you see what me I talk about. True, man. Yes, man. So, man, we're going to wrap up now. Yeah, man, we have to have you back again because we know so Rattigan list long, so him not started.
I remember I'm not at home because at home I have everything that I need to ask. I have a falling sick.
So we'll keep it here. So thanks for having you, yeah? And
yeah, man.
Hope to see you back again, and maybe on a Sunday and one of our
town
hall meeting. All
right.
No
problem with that. No problem.
Right,
we just plan it in advance. All the best.
Yes,
take care.
All right.
All
All the best.
All right.
Yes, but later.